Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.
This is Talkback 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Thursday, October 3rd edition of Talkback, brought to you this morning by Y West Storage out of the Y on Two Smokes Way. Now, if you need storage, put this number in your phone, 406-510-0590, because at Y West Storage, they're making room for you. Phillips Janitorial does both homes and business cleaning. No job too big or small for them. Satisfaction guaranteed when you call 406-260-6617. Phillips Janitorial. 123 Seamless Gutters is family owned and operated, doing gutter installations. Now's a good time to put those gutter guards in you've heard about. Call 406-240-2669. Protecting the foundation of your future. That's 123 Seamless Gutters. And by Harrington Surgical Supply, where their mission remains the same, to restore confidence and comfort into your daily life.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Hey, welcome everybody. Good to have you along. I'm Peter Christian. That is Mr. Nick Christensen over there. Good morning, Mr. Nick.
Good morning.
And joining us here in the studio this morning is Professor Emeritus Dr. Michael Mayer, joining us formerly with the University of Montana.
Morning.
And we have on the phone with us, we have Dr. Mehrdad Kia from his palatial offices located high above in the clouds of the University of Montana. So, gentlemen, it is time for global hotspots, and I can't even imagine where you would want to begin. So, gentlemen, the floor. By the way, the phone lines are open. If you'd like to get in the conversation, that's why they're here, is to talk with you folks. 721-1290 is the number. 1-800-568-5309. I know you want to get in on this conversation because it's a big one. So, gentlemen, it's all yours.
Well, first of all, Peter and Nick, thank you very much for having us once again. My greetings to my good friend and colleague, Professor Mayer. And let me start with something very different, in fact, and wish all our Jewish brothers and sisters a very Rosh Hashanah. It started evening of Wednesday, October 2nd, and it will go to Friday, October 4th. I would say it's really the equivalent of a Jewish New Year, and it's a major holiday, and it is a time that the Jewish community across the world celebrate. Unfortunately, we are in the middle of a very, very painful conflict between the Islamic regime in Iran and the government of Israel, and already, as you mentioned, Peter, it has caused a great deal of attacks on both sides, and this all started, of course, on October 8th, the day after Hamas attacked Israel. Hezbollah, the Party of God, which is basically a proxy of Iran, was warned not to enter into this conflict, but they began to fire missiles into Israel. These missiles are provided to Hezbollah by the Islamic regime in Iran. And it was very clear that after Israel felt confident that it had Hamas on the defensive, or at least decapitated, basically, in terms of its leadership capabilities, the turn of Hezbollah will come. And as most of our listeners know, these attacks took place in the last several weeks. First, that pager attack, where the pager that many leaders of Hezbollah had was basically beeping as if they had messages. When they took the pager out, it actually exploded, and it caused a significant casualty. Then, of course, there was another attack, but eventually all these attacks resulted into a hit on a building which was one of the headquarters of Hezbollah, which killed Hassan Nasrallah, the head of the organization, for the last 32 years. And so these are major blows. We believe by now about 50% of Hezbollah's capabilities have been hit and reduced. But it's a full-fledged war, and it's a new kind of war. It's not a land war. Iran and Israel do not have common borders. It's a new kind of postmodern, basically, war in which all kinds of technology, from cyber to other forms of technology, are being used. And, of course, Iran has retaliated by sending 180 to 200 missiles. This time, these missiles are faster. They travel faster, about 12 minutes, into the Israeli airspace. They have made some damages, but from our assessment, these damages are very limited. They hit few buildings, but these buildings were mostly empty. And the irony of all ironies is that they killed actually 2 people, and both were Palestinian Arabs. So there have not been any casualties inside Israel.
All right, well, gentlemen,
so that's where we stand.
Gentlemen, perfect timing because we're up against our first break. We also have Mr. Wingnut, who is always one of the first to respond for global hotspots. We'll try to get to him as soon as we can. We're going to come right back. We haven't heard from Dr. Mary yet. We'll hear from him as well. So we're going to come right back. This is Global Hotspots. In case you just joined us, we would love to have your calls as we talk about various hotspots going on around the world. So we'll be back right after this timeout.
Dennis Bragg with the latest weather. Sunshine today. A few clouds, though, later as we warm into the mid-60s in advance of a strong cold front pushing through the region. Another cold start tomorrow. We'll have some haze in the morning and then sunshine, possibly as warm as 80 degrees. Wind will be the big problem with gusts of 30 miles per hour in the valleys tomorrow and even 40 to 50 miles per hour at the higher elevations. Then high pressure comes back for sunshine through the weekend with highs in the mid-70s and overnight lows in the low 30s and 40s.
Okay, we are back on Talk Back. We're just getting started with global hotspots. Dr. Mayer, your thoughts before we get to calls.
Well, Mehrdad covered the highlights or lowlights, and I think that obviously we'll spend a lot of time on the Middle East because that's a really explosive area right now. But we about a week or so ago, Mehrdad and I had talked about the prospect of actually talking about maybe Argentina, Venezuela, France, or something, because these are areas where there are significant events that are worth paying some attention to. But the Middle East keeps thrusting itself into the headlines.
You bet. Well, let's jump right in and get our calls in. We'll like to get our callers on as quickly as we can. Mr. Wingnut is on the line right now. Sir, go ahead, please. What's on your mind?
Well, what I thought was quite telling and interesting about both the strike on Hezbollah in Lebanon and on the Syrian air base is that the Israelis did not let the United States know beforehand that they were going to do that, and possibly even with the pager incidents. And I think it's real telling on how our allies are starting to view the, I'll say, fecklessness of the policies that the United States is currently enacting. And I'd just like to get your take on that.
All right. So in other words, they don't trust us enough to tell us what they're going to do.
Well, I think that there's real reason for that. If you remember, during the Obama administration, leaked an Israeli plan successfully trying to prevent it from taking place. And so there's real distrust because a lot of the people in the Biden administration were people from the Obama administration, and there's been real distrust developing over a number of years between that set of actors and the Israeli government. So there's good reason, and I think Mr. Nutt is absolutely right that it's a good reason, they have good reason not to let the Americans know. I mean, to a certain extent, there's deniability in these other things, but I think in this case, it's a genuine concern for security, a lack of trust.
Also, though, I want to add one thing, which is, I think, very important. It depends on the targeting. So I think on basic retaliation, let's say, against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, I think there is already a green light from Washington. So Israelis may not actually check with the White House on these issues. However, now you have noticed that Prime Minister Netanyahu actually stated, and I'm sure this will happen, that Israel will retaliate against the most recent attack by Iran. However, there has been a delay. Why is that delay taking place? Because I think the Israeli Prime Minister and the White House are actually discussing what targets are acceptable to United States. And I think here it should be brought to the attention of our listeners that if Israel intended or intends to strike at Iranian nuclear targets, this will be a much longer process. Iranian nuclear industry is very scattered in various places. It will take probably a week to 2 week sort of bombing from basically Israeli Air Force, but also probably Israeli missile systems. And it will actually require United States participation and support for the Israeli Air Force. In that case, United States has a say, and Israel will check with the United States. And so far as I know, this morning, United States has not accepted that option. That is, the message to Israel is think about other targets other than the nuclear sites, which is very frustrating for Israel because Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly said that Iran is very close, in fact, by a week to 2 weeks, if it decides to weaponize its nuclear capability. But the Biden administration is resisting any kind of Israeli operation which will target Iranian nuclear sites.
All right. Well, let's try to get. Go ahead, Michael.
No,
Mr. Wingnut, you're going to. You're still on. Go ahead.
Okay, just a quick follow up. This seems to be kind of a duplicate of the policy that's been going on with the U.S. and Ukraine, where we're calling, we're giving a lot of angst to our NATO's and allies into Ukraine, and just our inability to want to step up and allow the job to get done. And I'll hang it now.
All right. Thanks for the call. And with that, we are up against a break. We're going to come right back. Helena and Dave are both waiting to visit. And again, this is Global Hotspots, and we really appreciate all the participation of our listeners. Dr. Kia, Dr. Mayer, both joining us this morning, providing leadership in this conversation. And we'd love to have you join us. So 721-1290 is the number. We'll be back right after this.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work. Sorry, I'm late. Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi. Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Okay, we are back. This is Talkback. Global hotspots rolling right along this morning. Dr. Mehrdad Kia is on the phone. Dr. Michael Mayer here in the studio. And Helena has been waiting the longest. Helena, good morning. And what's on your mind, please, ma'am?
Yeah, I wanted to ask your guests about the effects on the people of Iran, the populace of Iran, of these hostilities between the regime and these, in fact, now direct hostilities between the regime and Israel. What effect do you think do your guests think this is having on? Is it creating unrest or instability among the people? And my second question is, where do they think that Iran acquired these supersonic ballistic missiles that they suddenly came up with?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call. Very good questions, Mehrdad.
So, as far as the people are concerned, of course, as most of our listeners know, since 2009 and the eruption of the Green Movement, the overwhelming majority of Iranians have made it very clear that they do not only oppose, but they truly despise the present regime in Tehran. And the separation between the regime and the people have, in fact, been widening every few years as a result of more demonstrations and rallies, which were suppressed in a very brutal and bloody fashion. The last one was in 2022, only 2 years ago, when after a Kurdish Iranian woman, Mahsa Amini, was killed by security forces because of wearing improper dress in the street. Anyway, that resulted into over 1,500 killed and many young Iranians being shot in the face because the security forces were actually aiming for their eyes. This level of brutality, of course, has made the Islamic regime hated across the country. What I see all over the social media, through messages, texts, and so on and so forth, is that the overwhelming majority of Iranians consider this war with Israel completely uncalled for and unnecessary. Iranians are not Arabs, and why should, as you hear this over and over, why should we go to war with Israel over the death of a Lebanese Shia Arab leader named Nasrallah, or for that matter, Ismail Hania, the head of Hamas? What are we doing anyway in the Arab world, and why aren't we actually attending to our many problems? Massive inflation, unemployment, poverty, repression, and, the list goes on. And the newest, slogan, which has become very popular in Iran, neither Gaza nor Lebanon, I only die for Iran, which is very much the point of the attack is basically the Iranian regime.
Mike?
Yeah, I think Helena raised a couple of really important points, but the question that Mehrdad was addressing is one that one would hope American strategic thinkers are considering, because what steps you don't want to mobilize a public opinion behind the Iranian regime, although, as Mehrdad pointed out, at this point that's awfully hard for the regime over there to do. But at the same time, you have a weak regime embarking on a reckless, adventurous foreign policy. Maybe some sort of a swat on the nose with a rolled-up newspaper, not to put it too lightly, would be enough to destabilize that regime at home.
And what would it take for and Mehrdad, you and I have talked about this before, what would it take for the vast millions of Iranian citizens to rise up and overthrow these people? I realize that they have all the guns and the weapons, but is there a Bastille Day in their future somewhere?
I have to tell you, Peter, Iranian history is filled with dress rehearsals between the last chapter of a regime in power. And I think what we have been watching since 2009 are several dress rehearsals for the ultimate event, which is the overthrow. Now, is it going to be easy? No, it's going to be very difficult. Why? Because the leadership of the Islamic regime, namely Khamenei and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, not necessarily the armed forces, but the Revolutionary Guards, they have benefited from this regime in tune of billions of dollars. This is a business enterprise. It's a mafia. And if they lose the regime, they lose all their economic and financial privileges. So they will fight to the end. And when a regime still has the will to power, it will take a great deal, especially because the Iranian opposition is in tune with civil disobedience and so on and so forth, and does not want to resort to arms. The result is that these uprisings and rallies have been crushed, and the ultimate aim has not been accomplished. So this is a debate within the Iranian opposition. How long can we wait, and to what degree we should resort to violence? The leadership as a whole, especially those on the constitutional opposition and the moderate centrist opposition, is basically we should continue to try to undermine the regime's credibility, and it will crack from within. After all, they are all aging, and the average age of Iranian leadership is deceased. So let us just hammer that.
Right.
But I'm not sure that strategy would actually result into an actual overthrow anytime soon.
With that, we're up against. But go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say that the Revolutionary Guard, particularly the Basiji, it's roughly analogous to Hitler Youth. The kids are taken away from their families young and indoctrinated and trained, and they're genuinely fanatic. And while, as Mehrdad's pointed out a number of times, the military is very reluctant to. They're not going to shoot their own people, but these paramilitary fanatic units are.
Okay, with that, we're going to take a break. We have Dave and Emmett both waiting to visit with you, gentlemen. It's Global Hotspots, and we will continue when we return. Several other phone lines are open. We're still talking about what's happening in the Middle East, and we'd love to have your thoughts, or any other part of the world that could be considered a global hot. And there are plenty of them out there, so we're going to come right back after this.
For many Montanans,
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
Do you find yourself stuck in a timeshare? Get the real facts about the timeshare industry and your options for cancellation. Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group, has put together a free information guide that reveals the secrets the timeshare industry doesn't want you to know, including the 5 ways to get rid of your timeshare. Get this timeshare cancellation guide absolutely free.
Get your free guide at iCancelTimeshare.com. That's iCancelTimeshare.com. iCancelTimeshare.com.
Dennis Bragg with the latest weather. Sunshine today. A few clouds, though, later as we warm into the mid-60s in advance of a strong cold front pushing through the region. Another cold start tomorrow. We'll have some haze in the morning and then sunshine, possibly as warm as 80 degrees. Wind will be the big problem with gusts of 30 miles per hour in the valleys tomorrow and even 40 to 50 miles per hour at the higher elevations. Then high pressure comes back for sunshine through the weekend with highs in the mid-70s and overnight lows in the low 30s and 40s.
Hey, welcome back to Talk Back. It is Global Hotspots going on right now. Here in the studio, we have Professor Emeritus Michael Mayer. Professor Mehrdad Kia is joining us on the phone. And folks are lined up to talk with you, gentlemen. So Dave has been waiting the longest. Dave, thank you for your patience. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, first, the subject of Israel. The war didn't begin just the other day or whatever. It began in June of 1946 when the British left the Middle East, and has been going on ever since, just temporary stops. And peace will not happen until the Israelis and the Palestinians and whoever else wants to be a part of the negotiations sit down and hammer out an agreement. And otherwise it will go on forever. And there's no plans to sit down, so it will go on. Now, as far as Iran goes and its nuclear program, first of all, where they are in nuclear program is because we pulled inspectors out of Iran. And number two, a lot of the program is buried very deep in the ground, and it may take Israel using one of its nukes to take out the nuclear program, along with the radiation that even without a nuclear bomb, the radiation from hitting nuclear programs could cause a cloud that would go around the world. So I question attacking the nuclear program.
All right. Thanks for the call. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
Well,
go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, I think Dave is right that the war, in one sense, has been going on since, at least since partition in 1948-49. The struggle for control of land goes back before that. But it doesn't mean that you do need two sides for peace, but it doesn't mean that there can't be peace or that there won't be peace. It means that the approaches, I think, that have been taken up to this point haven't been successful. That's certainly the case, and the strategy of most American administrations has been of both parties really has been to lean on Israel to make concessions, and because that's the side with which the American government has the close relationship, and it hasn't worked. The idea of land for peace. Israelis pulled out of the Sinai. That did produce peace with Egypt, but pulling out of Gaza did not produce peace, and pulling out of the area of southern Lebanon didn't produce peace either. So some of the old formulas clearly have not worked. I don't think that, I know it's very difficult, but I don't think it means inevitably that there can't be peace. At some point, there almost has to be. And I find on the second point, I think Dave's right about both the difficulty and the danger of attacking the Iranian nuclear program. I mean, one is the difficulty. It's as Mehrdad said, widely dispersed. Much of it's buried deep underground, and again, if you hit a nuclear program, the risk of releasing radiation is pretty high.
Mehrdad.
Yeah. On the second point, I completely agree with Dave. I think, and that's why I have actually suggested, I think there is a much cheaper and far less dangerous option to attacking Iran's nuclear, facilities, which might be catastrophic, as Dave mentioned. I completely agree. Not only to the country and its 86 million population, but to the entire region, if not to the entire world. So I don't have any disagreement on that. I think the cheaper and much less dangerous option is actually to get rid of the regime, which is responsible for developing this. One. The second thing, we can go back to history and really rehash all these. We can talk about November 1947, when United Nations actually proposed a partition plan, a two-state solution, a Jewish state called Israel and an Arab state called Palestine. And it was rejected, unfortunately, by the Arab side. We can talk about, Camp David, for example, when President Sadat of Egypt heroically, I would say in retrospect, actually agreed to sit down with a very country he had gone to war with at least three times, 48, 67, and 73. And basically, nobody believed. Here's Anwar Sadat. On the other side, in Menachem Begin, former Irgun fighter, from the right of the Israeli political spectrum. But they actually sat down and they mapped out a peace plan, land for peace kind of solution, and it worked. But again, Anwar Sadat and Egypt were expelled from the Arab League because they negotiated with Israel. As Mike said, there has to be partnership in peace. And unfortunately, as long as Hamas runs the show and it's calling for the destruction of the Jewish state, you're not going to have an Israeli government which will negotiate with Hamas. You have to have peace partners. And I think what it has done, in fact, what Hamas has done, it has actually strengthened the right to the center coalition in Israel, which is not that interested in the two-state solution. So they say, well, as long as Hamas is there, why should we sit with enemies who want to destroy us? So this is the tragedy of the situation. If one wants peace, we have to find partners who actually want to sit down and seriously map out a peace process, which is very much has been mapped out by various organizations and even the U.S. government in the past. It is doable, but do we have people who are willing to actually lose a little bit of land in order to gain peace?
And with that, we are the perfect timing. We're up against a break. We're going to come right back. Emmett and Cody are both waiting. 7 other phone lines are open, by the way, in case you just joined us. So this is Global Hotspots. We do this at least once a month to talk with Professor Mehrdad Kia, of course, University of Montana Professor of History, Professor Emeritus Michael Mayer here in the studio, about basically hotspots occurring all over the globe. But right now, we've seen laser focused on the Middle East, and of course, we probably should. So we're going to come right back with more after this.
At Humana, our Medicare Advantage plans give you coverage and care you can count on, along with guided support to help you feel your best. You could have a plan with a $0 premium or an all-in-one plan that may include medical and prescription coverage, as well as routine dental, vision, and hearing. Learn more at gethumana.com. Humana, a more human way to healthcare. Humana is a Medicare Advantage HMO and PPO organization with a Medicare contract. Enrollment in any Humana plan depends on contract renewal.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
I'll trust water bottles and a flashlight to save the day, but I'll be proved wrong.
With a tornado approaching, I'll realize that I like a wheelchair-accessible shelter.
When the floodwaters rise, I'll be up in the attic with 20 cans of beans. It's a recipe for disaster.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everybody. Global Hotspots underway, a special part of Talkback. We do this as often as we can with Dr. Mehrdad Kia and Dr. Michael Mayer. And Emmett has been waiting very patiently. So, Emmett, good morning. What's on your mind? Go ahead.
Well, thanks for taking my call. Well, I guess kind of a lot of my questions actually have already been answered, but I don't know. I can see both points as to attacking the nuclear facilities. I don't know, but one... How is it America's role to determine what targets Israel can and cannot strike? I don't think that's really our business. I think the Israeli government knows more about what's going on than we do. I don't think that's our business to tell them how to plan their military operations. Second of all, if Iran is took 2 weeks, finally getting its weapons grade to enrichment, it's whatever you want to call it, ready to make a nuclear bomb. Maybe they won't have a nuclear bomb tomorrow, but that's a very, very big threat where we finally weaponized enriched uranium. We can put it on a weapon, hold the world hostage. They should have a right to take out the nuclear facilities. I'm sure they're taking everything into consideration. I'm just concerned about this restraint where we restrain Israel. I'd like to have them take out the regime themselves. Maybe that'd be a bit, but I don't know. It's so complicated. It really is to try and solve the world's problems in 2 hours. But what do you think of all this?
All right.
Do you have any answers to this? Or?
Thanks for the call, Emmett. Gentlemen, it's all yours.
Mike, please.
Well, if I had the answers, I wouldn't be sitting here probably. But Emmett raises some interesting points, and even setting aside whether or not anybody, Israel or some combination of countries, should attack Iran's nuclear facilities. The question of restraints on Israel is a complicated and very frustrating one. the United States does provide a lot of aid to Israel, and from the point of view of American administrations, that gives them a certain amount of say over what the Israelis might do or not do. On the other hand, this constant restraint on Israel, one could well argue, is what has led to this ratcheting up, because some of this stuff might have been settled if the United States hadn't put such restraints on Israel in 2006 or in 1973. I mean, you go back you could go back to their incidents in the 90s and the 80s, where administrations of both parties have leaned on the Israelis not to press an advantage when they're on. They respond to something. They're on the verge of a military victory and say, "Oh, don't do that. It might be destabilizing," and it leads to further destabilization. So Emmett's right. It's a frustrating and difficult cycle.
All right, let's get. Go ahead, please.
The issue is that while Israel relies on the United States for much of its military technology, it also has its own foreign policy priorities. And these priorities are not necessarily those of the United States. And so while there is an alliance, the alliance has its own tensions. And the tensions have been increasing since the Obama administration, especially when the President of the United States actually did not enjoy a very close relationship with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And the situation became so bad that they wouldn't talk even toward the end of the Obama administration. And that has been basically now continued through this one. Though I think the communications are not as bad as during Obama's administration, but the U.S. agenda during the Biden administration was to renegotiate the nuclear deal with Iran. And in order to negotiate the nuclear deal with Iran, the United States decided to create some incentives. And these incentives was, for example, allowing Iran to sell oil in the international markets, which gave Iran about $100 billion in cash. Well, that cash went to buy weapons from China and Russia, and of course much of that weaponry went to Hezbollah and Hamas, which of course caused a huge sense of disappointment and opposition in Israel. Also, remember, the Biden administration lifted the label terrorist or terrorist organization from the Houthis in Yemen, and then, of course, scrambled back to reimpose the label terrorist when the Houthis in Yemen started attacking Israel and international shipping on the Red Sea. So you see that policies of the Biden administration, which was basically, at least in the beginning, appeasing Iran, the policy of appeasement antagonized Israel and alienated from closer cooperation with Washington.
Also, I think Mehrdad raised a really important point with the Houthis. At the beginning of the Biden administration, and remember, there was a war really, between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis. And there were criticisms of Saudi Arabia. There were too many civilians killed and all the rest of this stuff. And the Biden administration leaned heavily on them to cease this and threatened to make them an international pariah. And this dynamic of constantly leaning on your allies and trying to make some sort of accommodation with people who are your enemies or opponents is has contributed, I think, to the sense of instability. It's both emboldened Iran, it's alienated Saudi Arabia, but it's also created some friction between the United States and Israel.
So what I hear you saying is you're not helping. Yeah. So anyway, and with that, we're up against a break. We're going to come right back. We have Cody, Rick, and Dave is back with another comment. By the way, in case you just joined us, this is Global Hotspots. Dr. Mehrdad Kia, Professor Emeritus Dr. Michael Mayer joining us in the studio, and we will continue talking about stuff all over the world when we come back right after this. Welcome back to Talk Back. Global Hotspots underway, and Dr. Mehrdad Kia, Dr. Michael Mayer, one in the studio, one on the phone, and we have three other folks on the phone. Cody has been waiting for quite a while. Cody, we appreciate your patience. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I got two questions. My first question is, it's something I'm disappointed I don't hear more about on the mainstream media. October 8th of last year, Hamas completely, without equivocation, without cause, just attacked Israel, and they took hostages. I'm wondering, do they still have hostages? How many hostages, and how many hostages of those are American?
Good question. Thank you for the call, gentlemen.
Yeah, it's a very good point. They originally
coming up on that 1 year anniversary.
Yeah,
too.
Right. And they originally took over 200 hostages, 250 hostages. A number of the hostages were released in that first ceasefire agreement. There's still a little over 100 by the best estimates. How many are alive is not clearly known.
Some are elderly, some are even infants, I understand.
Yeah, and some have died in captivity, apparently, and some were actually dead and taken. The corpses were taken into as hostages, and this has been a constant sort of friction point, because there's certainly a lot of pressure in Israel to get the hostages home. There's surprisingly a good bit less in the United States, but there are Americans held hostages. I'm not sure how many. I think it's less than 10 at this point. But there were about 40 Americans killed in the initial incursion. There were a number of Americans taken hostage, and there's been a lot of pressure on Netanyahu from the left in Israel and in this country, to make a deal for the hostages, but it's not clear what the deal would be. Hamas has rejected a number of ceasefire offers, or they've put up impediments. And in fact, one impediment was when they were at some point through mediators, at least reasonably close, it seemed, to getting a deal, was that Hamas insisted that whatever hostage number of hostages they were going to release at that point, and it wasn't all of them, included dead hostages. And so, I mean, this is one of these things. It's an agony for Israel. It's an agony for the United States as well. This is why people take hostages.
The number of, to answer an excellent question by Cody, we do not know the exact number of hostages right now. The Israelis have made guesstimates. These are not very clear numbers. There have been instances of the Israeli Defense Forces entering buildings or tunnels and finding out corpses, which means that they were killed before the Israeli Defense Forces entered these tunnels by Hamas fighters. There are infants, there are elderly, there are several Americans. We think, as Mike mentioned, somewhere around 10, but we are not sure about that. The tragedy of this moment is, of course, that by the time this war is completely over, they might be all killed, or they might be dead. The issue is that, as Mike also mentioned correctly, there has been a great deal of pressure on the Netanyahu government to negotiate and at least come up with a ceasefire option. But that ceasefire did not materialize despite...
had sold a number of Mirage jets, which was the mainstay of the Israeli Air Force, to Israel, which they then reneged on the sale, and Israel went and basically grabbed the jets and took them. But the United States hasn't always been the primary supporter or the primary armor of Israel. And in fact, it was Czechoslovakia in 1948 was probably the largest.
We are rapidly coming up on our. We have a hard break coming here in just a few seconds, but another half hour at least of. Is that right? Another half hour of global hotspots is on the way.
With or without phones.
Yeah, we're going to try to get Rick. Of course, we have Dr. Kia on the line. Stay with us. We'd love to have you join us.
This is Talkback 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Welcome back to Talkback. Hour number 2 is underway. Brought to you this morning by 123 Seamless Gutters, family owned and operated, offering free estimates as the fall deepens and getting close to winter. Everything to do with gutters, so you don't have to. Protecting the foundation of your future. 123 Seamless Gutters at 406-240-2669. Y West Storage is out at the Y on Two Smokes Way. If you need storage, here's their number. So write it down, put it in your phone, 406-510-0590, because at Y West, they're making room for you. Phillips Janitorial does residential and commercial cleaning with your satisfaction guaranteed. No job too big or small. 406-260-6617. That's Phillips Janitorial. And by Harrington Surgical Supply, where you can feel confident in their discreet and knowledgeable guidance on a multitude of products and medical supplies.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Hey, welcome back to Global Hotspots. Technical glitches aside, I think we're all back together now. And thanks to Nick and his expertise, we are back. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And joining us on the phone is Dr. Mehrdad Kia here in the studio, Dr. Michael Mayer. And we have Rick, who's been waiting quite a while. Rick, good morning, sir. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Thank you. It was announced this morning on one of your nationwide news broadcasts that NATO is about ready to accept Ukraine into NATO. Will Turkey allow that? And do you think that if NATO does accept Ukraine, that Turkey will fulfill their obligations as a member of NATO? And if they are accepted into NATO, will they be used as a offensive force and brought into Ukraine to the borders, or do you think that they'll just lay back like they normally do?
Wow.
And can I have my answer on the phone?
You bet. We'll keep you on. Go ahead, Mehrdad and Michael, please.
Yeah, that's Mehrdad. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Rick's question is an excellent one, and thank you for taking us out of the Middle East, at least the Arab Middle East and Israel. But I think that Mr. Erdogan, the president of Turkey, wants to project Turkey as a major power. It is a significant regional power, but it's not the kind of power that Erdogan wants to project it. He basically tried to block, as we all remember, the membership of Finland and Sweden to NATO on the basis that the two Scandinavian countries allowed Kurdish refugees who were wanted for political offenses or political crimes in Turkey, and he would block their membership unless they expel the Kurdish activists they had taken as refugees or as political refugees. And we saw in the end that this was a lot of huff and puff, and in reality, Turkey understood that for its military technology, it depends on the United States and the NATO. United States, they have a major air base in southeastern Turkey, Incirlik. That air base is absolutely essential for Turkey's security, but also for United States and NATO to watch Iran, Russia, the Arab world to the south. The Turkish armed forces still receives quite a bit of training and collaboration from the NATO and United States. And Erdogan knows that any obstacle he creates will jeopardize and undermine this alliance. At the same time, it will actually undermine his credibility with his military. And Turkey has had a few military coups in the past. You don't want to antagonize the Turkish military too much. And, of course, Erdogan is very much aware of it. So even if he opposes it, I think because of trying to sort of appease Putin and Russia, he has pretended as if he's a friend of Russia. But the Turks and their history is filled with anti-Russian sentiments as well. I think he uses it as a card to basically remind us and the Europeans that, look, I'm not solely dependent on United States and European allies, but in reality he is. And I think he knows that Ukraine needs to join the NATO and needs to join the European Union. And much of his imported grain comes from Ukraine, and any attempt to actually prevent Ukraine from joining might actually have severe consequences on Turkey's consumers, for which Ukraine play a very important role.
Yeah, there's also another element about the consideration at this point, which is Article 5, which guarantees that a war against one member of NATO is a war against all. Ukraine is at war at the moment, and so technically admitting Ukraine at the moment would be effectively committing all of the nations of NATO to
including
a war.
Us?
Yeah, including the United States.
Everyone, right.
You know, ironically, that was originally put in 1948 as NATO was being put together to protect Europe from what was feared to be a possible Russian invasion. But the only time it's been invoked was after 9/11. But it's there. It's technically binding on the members, and so as long as there's a war, I think the NATO will be very, very reluctant to admit Ukraine.
And with that, we are up against a break. We have thank you for the call, Rick. We have Tom waiting as well. And we have another 20 minutes or so left in our time together on the global hotspot. So if you have a question or a comment, we might even get off the Middle East. Who knows? We're going to come right back after this quick timeout. Stay with us.
Dennis Bragg with the latest weather. Sunshine today. A few clouds, though, later as we warm into the mid-60s in advance of a strong cold front pushing through the region. Another cold start tomorrow. We'll have some haze in the morning and then sunshine, possibly as warm as 80 degrees. Wind will be the big problem with gusts of 30 miles per hour in the valleys tomorrow and even 40 to 50 miles per hour at the higher elevations. Then high pressure comes back for sunshine through the weekend with highs in the mid-70s and overnight lows in the low 30s and 40s.
Okay, we are back on Talkback. Global Hotspots continues. I'm Peter Christian de Christensen, taking your phone calls, producing Talkback. On the phone with us right now, Dr. Mehrdad Kia at the University of Montana, and Professor Emeritus Dr. Michael Mayer joining us here in the studio. So, gentlemen, we have callers waiting, so let's get Tom on the line. Tom, good morning, sir. You're on Talkback. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. I think the biggest hotspot in the world right now is right here in the United States of America. We have had two attempts on the life of the, person running for the United States president, and the border's wide open. Inflation's out of control. The United States is broke. The Secret Service says they don't have enough money. FEMA says they don't have enough money. We've sent $120 billion to Ukraine. Things are a mess in the United States of America, let alone what's going on in the Middle East. I mean, nobody's even, when's the outside countries around the world going to come to the aid of the people in North Carolina? I just think, that things are so messed up here at home that we need to we need to do something about what's going on here. So I don't know. I've got a lot more things to say, but I'll just maybe let you gentlemen comment on that.
Very well said. Thanks, Tom. Gentlemen, please go ahead.
Well, I think that Tom reflects a significant sentiment within the United States about, we've got trouble here and we should be looking after our own. I don't think that necessarily means ignoring the rest of that we need to ignore the rest of the world. I think that's a mistake because the rest of the world affects us, and just withdrawing entirely is also dangerous. But he's certainly right about the problems faced by the United States, the border inflation, the debt, the deficit, and all these other things that he mentioned are significant problems that we're not addressing particularly well. And that even if you look at the debates as they've been carried out, really haven't been given a lot of attention. And these are things that obviously we should and need to consider. And I think I just add one other thing, which is to me one of the most alarming developments in the last week or 10 days. 2 former Democratic nominees for the presidencies and former secretaries of state, both, have basically come out against the First Amendment. You would never have heard an American politician do this even a decade ago. I mean, they didn't come out in quite those terms, but
they're concerned about what they're calling dis and misinformation.
Yeah, it's always been there.
Right.
And I mean, whether lies, false reporting, whatever you want to call it, you can give it all the different names, modern names, but the internet disseminates these. Yeah, people could have said the same thing in 1789. The printing press disseminates these things, and they did. But this is a real development here that I think we need to pay attention to as well, especially since so much of the Anglophone world, not to mention Europe, is turning away from any commitment to free speech. The restrictions on speech in Britain and Scotland and Ireland and Canada are...
It is spooky.
And the fact that we have significant leaders in America drifting in that direction is to me just absolutely terrifying.
Mehrdad.
I want to comment on something a bit related, but not directly related. And though I completely agree we have significant issues and challenges and problems, I have to say this based on my own personal observation, and this I know it's going to bother both sides of the aisle. It's actually the lack of a very deep and educated understanding of the world in which we live. I watched parts of that vice presidential debate. The fact that the response to the situation in Israel, Iran, Middle East, is something that they had to memorize. You could tell these were memorized lines. And they are not educated enough to actually speak on their own without helping of these memorized lines about, a more in-depth sort of analysis of the situation. And the constant mistakes, the constant, misspoken statements about various parts of the world is quite alarming in terms of the illiteracy, lack of literacy of the American political establishment is quite bothersome to me, at least, and quite disturbing that we live in this complex world, and instead of picking up a book, reading an article, surrounding yourself with analysts who know something about, the various situations, and I'm not talking just about Middle East, Ukraine, Taiwan, China, Russia, India, Latin America, Africa, whatever. We actually have a political leadership which is basically illiterate. And the fact that they claim that they want to lead, it's quite astonishing. At least go and educate yourself and then talk in a learned fashion. And this came out in the presidential, debate. It came out in the vice presidential debate. And it has come out repeatedly through the media. The media itself, all these talking heads, they strike me, for the most part, as being pretty uneducated and illiterate. And that makes me very worried in the overall situation. I had to make that comment. I apologize.
No, that's fine. As a matter of fact, we're just seconds away from a break. We're going to come right back. We have Buck and Jeff who are with us. And Global Hotspots ordinarily goes for the 2 full hours, but we are going to have to cut this off here at 9:30. We have special guest Catherine Bidegaray, who is running for the Montana Supreme Court, is going to be with us here in the studio from 9:30 until 10. So we hope you'll stay with us for that. So we're coming right back with more of Talk Back right after this.
Montana State News Network.
I'm Dennis Bragg. Based on the reports we aren't seeing this week, it would appear the rash of school violence threats across Montana over the last month may be slowing down, but law enforcement and school districts continuing to work together to deal with the problem. In Cascade County, Sheriff Jesse Slaughter recently explained his department is using $300,000 from the public safety mill levy and budgeting an additional $291,000 to boost safety.
We have worked really hard. We have increased our SROs to 3. We now have an intel analyst that can help assess threats. We're now doing AVERT training to train our staff in our schools on proper lockdown procedures and proper procedures if an unfortunate event is ever to occur.
Slaughter says the sheriff's office and schools have also added panic buttons for all teachers and staff, which help to locate specific threats for responding officers. Bozeman leaders are celebrating news. The city is going to receive a $4 million FEMA SAFER grant, which will allow the city to hire a dozen new firefighters over the next 3 years. They say that will lower some of the costs associated with the plans to boost emergency services with a special first responder levy, which is on the ballot in November. If you're thinking of adding some puppy power to your home during the upcoming winter and holidays, you might want to carefully consider the cost, with a new report suggesting Montana is really expensive for dog owners, as Ashley Warren explains.
Well, if you're thinking about adopting a puppy in Montana, you may want to think twice about the cost. A new MarketWatch study shows that Montana is the 19th most expensive state in the entire United States when it comes to adoption. They predict that it will cost you roughly $900 to adopt a puppy, and this reporter knows that to be true because she just adopted a puppy. For the Montana State News Network, I'm Ashley.
This is the Montana State News Network.
For more on these stories and others around Montana, download the Montana State News app.
When you see the emergency lights on the side of the road, slow down and move over. It's dangerous for first responders to help motorists on the side of the road while cars are buzzing by at 80 miles per hour. In Montana, when you see emergency lights on the side of the road, you must slow down and move over, or face a fine or even jail time. It's the law. When you see someone pulled over, slow down and move over.
Sponsored by the Montana Department of Justice.
Papa, why can't we telegraph while riding a horse? Son, there ain't no one to blame but Jeffro. He was riding old Betsy the Stallion, tip-tapping away at his telegraph, when blam, ran right into the side of the saloon.
Well, if Jeffro can't do it, neither should you. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Freedom and flexibility. That's what you want in a healthcare plan. And with Humana's Medicare Advantage PPO plans, you can see any doctor in the country who accepts Medicare, including specialists, with no referrals needed. Plus, you can go in and out of network for the same copay for doctor's visits. Learn more at GetHumana.com. Humana, a more human way to healthcare. Humana is a Medicare Advantage PPO organization with a Medicare contract. Enrollment in any Humana plan depends on contract renewal.
On Talkback, 721-1290 is our number on this glorious morning here in western Montana. Global hotspots going on right now. Dr. Mehrdad Kia joining us on the phone. And here in the studio, Dr. Michael Mayer. Buck has been waiting. Buck, good morning, sir. You're on Talkback. What's on your mind, sir?
Well, a new thought since I called. You know, when royalty governed Europe, the aristocrats eventually became a bunch of inbred imbeciles. So maybe our self-appointed aristocrats here are trying to repeat history, but
I don't think they inbreed quite as much.
Well, something causes it. They inbreed as far as their source of information, perhaps. They live in a bubble. But,
yeah, I think that's true.
Dr. Mayer, Emeritus, do you no longer actively teach?
No, I'm retired.
Well, to me, that's a shame. You may not recall, but some time ago, I tend to be rather overly inclusive and convoluted in my questions. There's a reason for that, but and the show moves on. But you picked up on two
two things that were bothering me, and I think that's just, you must have had a wonderful aptitude for teaching, because students can read the book and get the gist of it, but if they're missing a point, there was a black woman one time who couldn't read, and when people pointed out to her that our alphabet indicates particular sounds, as an adult, she became an accomplished reader in a short time, so she missed a crucial point. And my opinion is your ability to pick up on the student needs was exceptional, having gone through college. And I just wanted to compliment you. You must have been an absolutely wonderful professor.
Well, thanks very much.
And maybe I'll save my other question for another time and let Jeff, because he's always interesting, have the last word.
Thanks for the call. All right, Jeff, go ahead and live up to that, sir.
Hey, the check is in the mail.
That's right.
Two things regarding the Middle East. W.H. Auden wrote a poem decades ago, over a century ago. There will be no peace. It wasn't about the Middle East, but it ends with the phrase, "They hate for hate's sake." And hate is not rational. There's nothing you can do to convince people. You can't argue your way logically out of hate. People just have to stop hating. And as long as they do hate, there's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is protect yourself. And that's unfortunately, the mindset of a large part of the Arab mentality. And regarding freedom of speech, I didn't intend to talk about that, but it is really refreshing. I'm going to echo, was it Mike?
Yeah.
Who talked about, a couple of academics who, from a notionally liberal arts college, that can recognize that and come on the air and say it openly. I just applaud you guys for that, because that's a testament both to you and I think to the structure that you guys taught within, that the University of Montana has not become a bastion against free speech like so many other universities, and I applaud that, and I certainly hope that continues. And then what I actually called about was to change this completely. One of the global hotspots is right here in the United States, and that's the devastation caused by Hurricane Helene. Everyone was looking at Florida and wondering how they were going to fare. Nobody ever thought about North Carolina, or even I have relatives in Ohio who had power out for extended periods of time, trees down, and all sorts of different things because of this hurricane. It was an anomaly in terms of the way that the water came in and how much water it poured down. I'm thinking they were talking about like 3,000 liters per second or something. It was haven't had anything this substantial for decades. But we have the part that really bothers me is that FEMA is asking for more money for this. Yet I heard a news article just this morning said that FEMA has spent over $1 billion on illegal aliens, making sure that they have debit cards and places to stay and food and transportation and everything else. And so FEMA is busy taking care of illegal aliens, but when it comes time to taking care of Americans who need help because of acts of nature, I'm sorry, we can't afford to do that. We need more money. That is just a cognitive disconnect on as I see it, and I'd like to hear your guys' comments on that.
All right, and gentlemen, this will have to be it because we have to wrap things up. But thank you for the call, Jeff, Mehrdad, and Michael. Go ahead, please.
Well, I certainly join him, and the people who've been affected by Helene. It's tragic, and it is genuinely unbelievable that to see that kind of flooding in the mountains, of western North Carolina and so many other states were affected, and it's one of those things that people didn't anticipate it turning out the way it did. It's very difficult to get aid to some of these places, and I guess all we can do is hope that FEMA stays on the job and is good at it.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts and prayers are with the victims of Helene, and just watching the scenes and the devastation was not only mind-boggling, but it was heartbreaking. And my own sort of simple reaction is I wish to see FEMA react much faster and much more proactively to these kinds of situations and to be on the ground as quickly as possible. I understood that electricity was gone for many days, and it just made me wonder, how can people live in this kind of situation under these circumstances for so many days? So I do think that some folks have offered help and support, which is wonderful, but I wish that the federal government was also as quick in terms of its response, regardless of who runs the White House.
Gentlemen, we need to talk a little bit about the next, for the entry in the KGVO book club. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's coming up, and the book is Nellie Bowles, Bowles. She was a reporter for the New York Times, and her book is called Morning After the Revolution, and it's about her experiences and her dissatisfaction with the modern what has evolved from liberalism to modern progressivism or woke progressivism, which she has some criticisms of as somebody who is sympathetic to many of the many progressive ideals, and yet her wife, Barry Burke, was expelled basically from the New York Times, and she left voluntarily, but in an intolerable situation.
All right, well, gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you both very much for sharing your expertise and your time. We appreciate it, and thanks to all the callers. We're going to take a quick break, come right back. We're going to shift gears a little bit, talk with Catherine Bidegaray. She's a candidate for the Montana Supreme Court, and she'll be here in the studio with us when we return right after this.
Hey, it's Deb at Park. Anyone can choose to make a difference. You can help people succeed, rebuild after disasters, protect the environment, or feed the hungry. Not only will you make a difference for others, but for yourself. You can earn money for college, learn career skills, and make friendships that last a lifetime. Make a difference. Choose your future. Choose AmeriCorps.
Okay, welcome everybody. Good to have you along this morning. And I want to say again, thank you to Dr. Michael Mayer and Dr. Mehrdad Kia for helping out with Global Hotspots today. But we are shifting gears this morning, and we're talking about politics in a way. I guess it is, because the way the Montana system is put together, when we select judges, especially people for the Montana Supreme Court, these are elected positions. And so we are privileged to have with us Catherine Bidegaray. She's a candidate for the Montana Supreme Court. Let's get that microphone right up close to you. There we go. Okay, perfect. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be on this show. I appreciate it much.
Well, tell us a little bit about Catherine Bidegaray, if you would.
I was born in Sidney, Montana, where I still live. I was raised on a farm and ranch in Richland County. Sidney is the county seat of Richland County. And I learned a lot of things on that farm and ranch. It was one of my best educations, other than graduating from the University of Montana and the University of Montana School of Law. But on that farm and ranch, I learned to work hard, but also to value education. And I had the opportunity to live most of my life there and to raise 5 kids on that farm and ranch.
Wow. So there you go. So you basically have lived a full Montana life.
I've basically born, raised, and educated in Montana. And as far as running for the Supreme Court, my farm and ranch background alone doesn't qualify me for that position, of course.
Right, of course.
But
you've had a very long, very prestigious career in law. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, just this past week, I celebrated 39 years ago that I started my first legal job. As I mentioned, I'm a graduate of the University of Montana, where I got degrees in philosophy and political science, and then I went straight into law school and graduated from the University of Montana School of Law, and had my first job in Helena, where I worked for 4 years at the state auditor's office protecting Montana consumers and against insurance fraud and investors against investor fraud. Then I practiced law for about 14 years in eastern Montana, because the family farm where I had grown up either needed to be sold or somebody needed to come back and run it. So my then husband and I moved back to run it. And then I engaged in the general practice of law for about 14 years and was elected to district court judge for the 7th Judicial District, which encompasses 5 counties in eastern Montana: Dawson, Macomb, Prairie, Richland, and Webo, in 2002, and have been elected 3 more times since that. I'm 2/3 of the way of my 4th term. They're 6-year terms. As a district court judge, we're general jurisdiction trial judges, so we handle all kinds of cases. The bulk of things that happen, I guess, in the middle section of our judicial hierarchy, we have courts of limited jurisdiction, district courts, and then the Supreme Court. So our decisions get appealed to the
That
Supreme
is
Court.
a long time to be on the bench, especially in one location. So do you have any specific cases that jump right out at you that really were landmarks, if you will, that we might recognize as something that is important in the way we live right now in Montana?
Well, I guess the landmarks of my judicial career are that I consider every single case that comes before me to be critically important, no matter how insignificant the issues within it might appear to outsiders looking in, because what I recognize from having practiced law for almost 18 years before I became a judge is that the issues that are being addressed in the court where we resolve disputes are critically important to the litigants involved in them. So I consider every single case I have ever been involved in to be important and to have ramifications with the decisions that I make.
Well, if you don't mind, we've got folks lined up on the phone to talk with you. So if that's okay with you, let's get Charlotte up first. Charlotte, good morning. You're on with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you for taking my call. I'm just curious if you will give us your word that you will keep politics out of the Montana Supreme Court and follow the Constitution every single time that you make a decision, Catherine.
I give you my word. That has been part of my platform, is to keep politics out of the courtroom. We're living in times when there have been concerted efforts to politicize our courts. And frankly, it's important that for the citizens of our state that we have judges who are neutral, who are fair, impartial, who treat people with respect, and who aren't colored by having adhered to some sort of a political ideology, because really we should be deciding our cases based upon what's been presented on that particular case in the record and not be relying on things outside of the record, because in no other way can the litigants before us be assured of the fairness that they're entitled to receive and that they expect to receive. My commitment is to adhere to the United States and the Montana Constitutions, just like the oath that every one of us that gets licensed to practice law, every one of us who gets elected to any position in this state has to take an oath to do. And I am committed to the 1972 Montana Constitution and the many rights that it gives each of us Montanans, and am committed to protecting those rights.
Charlotte, does that answer your question for you?
That certainly does. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the call. All right. So let's, where are we? We have time for another call before we take a break. Skip is on the line. Skip, good morning. You're on with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead, please.
And thank you, Peter. And ma'am, I'll ask a pertinent question here, if I may, because I'm sure other people will line up. You only have a half an hour. I'd like to ask you something that Jeremiah Lynch I saw on an interview. 3 times I heard him say that we have a constitutional democracy, and he would not even ever use the word republic. I'm curious if you believe the same as he does about that specific thing, because I understand that a constitutional republic is an elected representation, which we have. I'd like to know where you stand on that. In addition, I have right in front of me from the Wild Montana Voter Fund, your picture and Dan Wilson's picture on this big flyer that is telling me that our freedoms and our public lands are on this ballot this November, and so that it's like Dan Wilson is going to do something bad about our public lands and you are not. But there's nothing on both pages that tell me anything about why Dan Wilson would be blocking up public access. So it's just a big general statement in a very expensive paper here that my guess is well, anyway, and then there's another one about Corey Swanson, same kind of thing, no backup. Would you please explain how come things like that happen, where these big general statements are made and there's nothing to back them up? But please, the first question is important to me because that's how I might vote as to whether you believe in a constitutional republic versus a democracy.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for the call. And because we're exactly on a break, we're going to give her time to talk, to chew that over and come up with the answer for you. When we come back, we also have Sue, Al, and Colin all waiting to visit with you. This is great. We love having all this class participation. This is good. We're going to come right back after this timeout. You know what?
Need to replace your Social Security card? In most states, you can request one online with a My Social Security account. A My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal earnings history and benefit status. You can also get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
If you served, we want you to get the health care and benefits you earned. We want you to come to VA.
There's never been a better time to apply. Under a new law called the PACT Act, we've expanded VA care and benefits to millions of people who served and their survivors.
No matter where you served or how long you served, check out va.gov/PACT to learn more about what VA can do for you and your family. Come to VA.
Okay, some important questions for Catherine Bidegaray from Skip. So go ahead, if you could answer those for us, please.
So we live in a country that is both a federal republic and has chosen democracy as its form of government for the way that we elect the people who make the decisions as to policy. And so I don't think that the two terms are mutually exclusive because we are a republic, but we have chosen democracy to be the way that we allow all of the citizens within our country who are licensed to vote to help inform the decisions that our country makes. As for the flyers that you're getting, we candidates don't have control over who chooses to support us or oppose us, or who chooses to send out advertising, and we definitely don't have any control about what's within those documents. The reason I think maybe the one that you referenced might support me instead of my opponent is probably that I have consistently, as I have campaigned across the state over the last 15 months, said that I will uphold the individual rights that our Montana Constitution provides each of us Montanans. And I have mentioned that among those rights is the right to access to public lands and waters. And so whoever is behind that advertisement probably has heard me consistently say that.
Okay. Let's get Sue on the line. Sue, good morning. You're on Talkback with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead, please. Hi, Sue. Hello, Sue. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. You're on with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead, please.
Right. Yeah, there's been a lot of attacks on the judiciary, especially in the legislature. And I'm just wondering if you think that those attacks are warranted as a sitting court judge, or I just kind of want to know your feelings about how the last session was pretty anti-judiciary. Your thoughts about that?
Okay, thank you, Sue.
So in Montana, just as the federal constitution requires separation of powers, the Montana Constitution does as well. So we have three co-equal branches of government, each with its distinct roles and responsibilities. The reason that those who formed our country to begin with and those who adopted the 1972 Montana Constitution included that kind of mechanism is to make sure that we don't have power centralized in one location so that there is abuse of power. And so the concern about the attacks on the legislature that I have is that it really erodes public trust in our judiciary. which has the important role of interpreting the laws that the legislature passes and addressing the governmental actions that the executive branch takes. And it also has the further responsibility that if either of those two branches exceeds its constitutionally doled out power, the judiciary needs to keep that in check. And so I can't comment on any of the legislation that was passed because I want to keep an open mind for any legislation that might come before the Montana Supreme Court if I'm elected to it, so I can consider all the issues carefully. But the attacks on the judiciary do concern me because we don't need to look too far back in history to see where attacks on the judiciary have devolved into a bad situation for the citizens of the country where the judiciary's effectiveness was eroded.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks for the call.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the call. We have Al standing by. Al, good morning. You're on with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have heard that the current makeup of the Montana Supreme Court has a very high number of cases that are overridden by other courts or higher courts. And that does not sound good to me. I'd like your comment on whether you think that there's a higher number of cases that are overridden or not. And I'll just listen off air.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you for that question. I am embarrassed to tell you that I have never looked at the rate of reversal of decisions made by the Montana Supreme Court. So I am not familiar really with what rate of reversal higher courts have.
It has been said that Montana's Supreme Court has been overridden more than any other state by higher courts. So,
well, what I would say about that is that Montana Supreme Court is the arbiter of what the law of Montana is. I take an oath to follow what that law is and what commitment I bring if I'm elected to the Montana Supreme Court is that I will stay fair, I will stay impartial, I will consider any arguments that are made as to prior cases that might be the basis of why the Montana Supreme Court is repeatedly being overruled with an open mind and listen to those things. But basically our system depends on stability, which is really improved by having judges and attorneys be able to rely upon established precedent. But if there are arguments that are made about established precedent that make it clear that it's wrong, I'd have to listen to that, and I would.
All right, because you are now. How many members are on the Montana Supreme Court?
7.
There's 7. Okay, and you are going to be replacing Dirk Sandifer.
Yes.
Okay, because he's retiring, stepping down, or
he chose not to run again.
Okay, all right. So let's tell you what. We are 1 minute away from a break, so I want to give Colin and Katie and Cody and Riley, but we only have 8 minutes left, so we're going to get as many calls in as we can for Catherine Bidegaray. This is great. We appreciate it. We're going to come right back after this 1 minute timeout.
Lucky Diamond.
This October, Tanger invites you to shop pink and save lives. Your donation of $10 or more to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation helps fuel innovative research that brings us closer to a cure. It also unlocks exclusive savings from brands like Coach, Crocs, Columbia Factory Store, and more to shop all month long. Join us as we mark 30 years of advancing research and empowering hope. Donate and access your exclusive savings today at Tanger.com.
Small businesses are the heart of America. But you don't have to go it alone. As the nation's largest nonprofit resource of expert business mentoring, SCORE has helped millions of entrepreneurs build their businesses for free. Get the connections, education, and guidance you need with SCORE. We're ready to help. Find a mentor today at SCORE.org.
And we are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Catherine Bidegaray joining us here in the studio this morning, a candidate for the Montana Supreme Court. We'll get as many calls in as we can in the next 8 minutes. Colin, good morning. You're up.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to call in just mostly to ask about public lands and the last few election cycles, there's been a lot of rhetoric with a lot of candidates throughout the West, not just in Montana, about privatization of public lands, and I wanted to know what Judge Bidegaray's opinion and stance on the constitutionality of moving that. For people like me, it's most of my private life and quite frankly, my entire livelihood as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thanks for the call. So go ahead, Catherine.
So our Montana Constitution does address access to public lands and waters. The cases that might be raised related to that constitutional protection that we all enjoy in Montana would be ones that, again, I would have to listen to what the specific issue was about it and what the arguments are and what the established precedent is. And, of course, if there are attacks on the precedent not being appropriate, I'd have to listen to those arguments as well. As far as privatization of public lands goes, that would be an issue more addressed by the legislature, because the Supreme Court would only be interpreting the laws that the legislature enacts related to privatization of public lands and wouldn't be involved in actually.
So there are steps that have to be taken before you would get involved in a situation like that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Katie is back. Katie's with us. Good morning, Katie. You're on with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm just calling because I am a young Montana and I'm in Gen Z, and I'm wondering how important the Supreme Court decisions are in our way of life in the state. How do those decisions impact the Montana way of life?
Okay. Thanks for the call.
Thank you for that question, too. The decisions that the Montana Supreme Court makes affect everyday Montanans every day, because the Montana Supreme Court determines what the law of the state is. The Montana Supreme Court interprets the laws that the legislature enacts. It also addresses any questions that might be raised about the way the government takes action in connection with its citizens. So the decisions that the Montana Supreme Court make touch all Montanans, basically, directly or indirectly, every single day.
All right. And see, who's up next? I believe Cody is up next. Cody, good morning. You're on Talkback. What's on your mind, please?
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. I got a comment and a question. My comment is I'm disappointed every time I hear someone that's running for public office when they use the term hybrid republic democracy. That's not what we are. That term was made up as revisionist history. Although our election process is supposed to be a representative democratic process, the form of our government is a republic. And I'm so disappointed every time I hear someone running for office, especially Supreme Court, to use that type of revisionist history. My question will be more specific. I'm going to stick to recently. The Supreme Court has been making decisions on whether the government can restrict speech under the guise of misinformation. The way America is supposed to be is that nobody has the authority to tell us what misinformation is and restrict the speech under that guise. I'd like to know whether you support that or not. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the call. Yeah, misinformation, disinformation.
Okay, so on the restriction of speech, as far as that's concerned, we have a long history of case law that does address there to be some restriction of speech. For example, the example that's usually given is you can't yell fire in a movie theater. And so there are instances which our whole jurisprudence allows there to be some restrictions on speech. As far as misinformation or disinformation, in the courtroom, I hope that I get to the bottom of what is the truth, because garbage in, garbage out. If we make decisions based on information that is not accurate, if, for example, I have an issue that involves the expertise of an expert who's going to give me, enlighten me about an area that I know nothing about, it's important that I listen to that expert and that the people that disagree with the expert have the opportunity to cross-examine the expert so that we get to what might be the heart of the truth. Because if we make decisions based on lies, we're going to make bad decisions. And so misinformation, disinformation, I'm not the one who's going to be characterizing what is what, but I do hope that in my field, in the work that I do, that I have the opportunity to get to what really is the truth.
Okay, we have another caller. I think this may be, we have Riley up next. Riley, good morning. You're on with Catherine Bidegaray. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being on the air today. I'm wondering, how does a judge maintain impartiality as a Supreme Court justice?
That's a question I asked her off air, but thanks for the call. Thanks for the call. Go ahead, please. How do you do that?
Well, the way that I personally do it is that I look at every litigant that is in front of me, whether it's a human being or a business entity, and I know that what formed me as a person might not have been what formed them. I know that I have adopted certain ideologies. I belong to, for example, a certain religion. I know that not everybody belongs to that. It would be incredibly unfair for me to imprint upon the people appearing in front of me my own belief system, because I feel I have a responsibility to keep the playing field even for the litigants who appear before me, and that my personal opinions on things would be an incredibly unfair factor to consider in my decision-making. So that's how I keep myself impartial.
We have about a minute left in our time together. Ordinarily, we give you more time, but we'd like to take our callers. Why should we vote for you?
You should vote for me because of the experience that I have. I have been a district court judge for 3 times as long as my opponent. I have kept politics out of the courtroom. I have been committed to the impartiality and fairness of the judiciary by refusing to attend any partisan political functions or events, in contrast to my opponent who attends them regularly. I also have been committed throughout my life to considering the issues of every person and respecting all of the people who appear in front of me. My judicial philosophy is rooted in the rule of law, that nobody is above the law, and that we need fairness, we need respect, and we need impartiality in the court. And that's what I'm committed to bring to the Montana Supreme Court.
Catherine, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for sharing that. I wish we had more time, but you did very great. You did excellently. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. All right. So, Nick, what's coming up on tomorrow's fabulous program, sir?
We're going to have a best of show tomorrow as well as Monday, but we will be back on Tuesday.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, get out there and enjoy this absolutely another spectacular day. I get tired of saying that, but it's gorgeous out there. So take advantage of it. Go take a walk, take a hike, do whatever. And we'll see you tomorrow morning bright and early at 8 o'clock for another edition of Talkback. And we appreciate you being with us and our guests for Global Hotspots and Catherine Bidegaray as well. Have a great day, everybody.